One. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today our reading was Leviticus 24 and 25. Now, let's just go ahead and I want to encourage you a little bit. Wasn't it fun? Like for those of you who are using the paper copy of our reading plan, wasn't it fun to finally get to the place where you're at the end and you're about to turn over onto the next page and just kind of get to the home stretch? I like that. The goal of this is not to check off the list, but I love to check things off a list. And so I'm just put that out there. The other thing is from here, we go into just one chapter a day for the rest of the week and we finish up the book of Leviticus. Now in chapter 24 and chapter 25, you got a little bit of stuff that you thought, oh, absolutely, this is appropriate Leviticus stuff. Then there was stuff where it was looking ahead and you're going, oh, this sounds like we're now looking off into the distance, right? That's what happened. So in chapter number 24, it starts out by talking about the tabernacle. Then there's this odd story about this guy who curses the name of the Lord. He blasphemes and he's put to death. That's an odd story. It feels like that it's oddly placed. And you go, well, it just sounds odd in the middle of all of these laws that we've been going through. But here's the deal. What if that's not there by accident? What if it's there by illustration? And we can come back to that. Then in chapter number 25, what happens is the view changes from what you do inside the tabernacle as you're walking around the wilderness. Now it's anticipating you're about to go into the promised land. And when you go into the promised land, you are going to be given homes and land and all this kind of stuff. And when you get there, you got to understand, you got to remember, the land is not yours. You will be given that land, but it will be an inheritance because your father will give it to you. You don't own it. You steward it during your lifetime, but your father owns it. And so as long as you remember who's in charge of it, you're going to be okay. Now, let's kind of go back. So in chapter number 24, inside these laws about the tabernacle, you got to remember three things are going on in this chapter. It's talking about how they're supposed to provide oil, so they keep the candle burning inside the tabernacle. They're supposed to provide grain and oil to make bread to put on the table inside the tabernacle. And then they're supposed to honor the Lord. Now, let me tell you why this matters. Because inside the tabernacle, you got to remember, the tabernacle had a wall around it, right? It was not a super high wall. You couldn't see over it, but it was high enough to where you could see the top of it. You know, you could raise your hand and probably be near the top of it. But that was a barrier. It was symbolism. You only go in through the gate. There was only one way in. Jesus is going to pick up on this, right? He is the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father except through him. So there was only one gate into the tabernacle. You go in there, then there's the building on the inside. You saw the altar, then you saw the place where they would wash their hands, then you saw the building. The building had curtains, it had a roof, then it had a covering, then it had a second covering. Here's the deal. Inside that tabernacle, there was no sunlight. How did they light the way to do all the ministering they needed to do? Because of that candlestick that was in there. That giant golden menorah that casts light everywhere. That was to be continually burning. And the idea was that as they went around the wilderness, in that dark wilderness, when that light was continually on, they knew God was continually there. It was like Motel 6 leaving the light on. They go, oh, the light's on, God's home. And that's why it never went out, right? So they continually kept feeding it this oil to make sure that the light was always going. The other thing was they would provide 12 loaves of bread, probably little rolls, and they would lay them out in a specific order. 12, like the 12 tribes of Israel. One roll, one loaf representing every tribe. Why? Because inside the holiest of holy places in all the camp, everybody was represented inside there. Everybody was under the watch care of God. God knew everybody. God had his eyes on everybody. Everybody was near to the heart of God. Everybody was represented. God never forgot anybody. And then you have this odd story about this guy who blasphemes. Now, the Bible tells us that he's got a Jewish mother, but an Egyptian father. It tells us the Israelite man's Jewish mother's name. Doesn't so much get into information about the dad. Talks to us about the mom. Doesn't really talk to us about the dad. It may have been that the dad we know was Egyptian. Very well could have been he stayed in Egypt when the Israelites left. He didn't believe. He wasn't part of that society. We don't really know what relationship there was with the mom and that. Was it a happy marriage? Was she a slave? And we don't know. We just know that she's out, and this young man got angry, his temper boiled over, and he cursed the name of the Lord. Now, here's what you got to remember in a case like that. You got to remember in a case like that what's down in your heart is eventually what comes out. And so not only was the action disciplined, this guy died for this, right? Why? Commandment number 3, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And so he had done this, and everybody heard him. And an example was made over how we treat the name of God. Why? Because everything that's happening in the book of Leviticus is about holding up the high standard of the holiness of God. Listen, all these laws were built on how holy God was. And so if that crumbled, if their view of God crumbled, their society would crumble. Now just, keep reading. Go to 1st and 2nd Chronicles and 1st and 2nd Kings. Go to the prophets and watch as their spiritual lives declined, how their society also declined. So right here early on, you got another example of this, like in the New Testament. Remember when the church was very young, and there was a couple who had sold some land, and they lied about it, and they took God's name lightly because they were building up their own egos, and they wanted to look good, but not really. They weren't honest about it. They died, and look, what did everybody in the room go? Oh. The Holy Spirit, who is present and active, we don't play games with him. So in both these cases now, a death is now an illustration of the holiness of God. We're not dealing with normal people. We're dealing with a holy God, and we don't forget it. In chapter number 25, it talks about years of Sabbath. So it's looking ahead to them being in the promised land. And I'm telling you, this is an incredible story of God's mercy. Think about how he designed this society. He designed this society where they were primarily going to be farmers and herdsmen, right? Every 7 years, they were to take a break. Now, you still fed your animals, but you didn't do any farming. Well, you go, well, what did you eat? God would provide. God said on the 6th year, in preparation for the 7th, in the 6th year, he was going to give so much food, they would have enough food for 3 years. That all they had to do was trust the Lord and take a break. Rest. Be in a rhythm. Take a Sabbath year. Well, that's an interesting way to live. But these are the same people that are living in the wilderness, and every day they wake up and there's manna that's dropped from the heavens. God is literally giving them their daily bread. And so now they're hearing, okay, when we go in, we're not even going to farm. Every 7 years, we're going to trust the Lord to feed us the way he fed us in the wilderness. Hey, did they do it? No, they didn't. We don't have record of them ever doing this. But this is the way it was set up. But furthermore, every 7 of those 7 years, so on the 50th year, they would call it the year of Jubilee. Not only would they not farm, but that would be the year where God would provide an economic readjustment for his people. To be equitable, to be fair, to be gracious, to be wonderful to them. Here's what would happen. So not only would he provide them food, but every 50th year, all of their debts. You're fine. It was a squirrel. All of their debts were canceled. Can you imagine somebody just getting home and going, hey, look, anybody with credit card debt, any debt, all wiped out. God said so. Not a bad day for a lot of people, right? Anybody that had gotten themselves into trouble financially and sold their home and their land in order to survive, every 50th year, it would be given back to their family. This was a way, when we're reading through this was a way that made it impossible for wealthy people to be ruthless and to gobble up things at the expense of the poor. God cared about the poor, and they were going to get justice and get all their stuff back. Even if times had gotten so tough that they had sold themselves under contract to work for and serve others, every 50 years, contract's over. Hey, you go live your life, go farm your own land, go back. God says, welcome to the promised land. This is not heaven, but this is gracious. Tony Evans said of this, he said, the principles of this year relating to serving and redemption and freedom have great meaning to us as believers today because we are God's possession since he bought us from the slavery of sin by the blood of Christ. We are free from sin and death, and we are servants of God alone. Warren Wiersbe said, like the announcement of the year of Jubilee, the gospel is good news to the poor because our debts have been paid and completely forgiven. Just as debtors and slaves were set free to enjoy the Jubilee, so sinners are set free when they trust the Lord to save them. I love it. Imagine a world where the Lord cancels all debts, releases the captives, and makes people free. Hey, beautiful world. They didn't do it. But God had such a good plan for them had they only listened. All right, we're about to wrap up Leviticus. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter number 26. Bye.